The other night I had a dream in which I had a near-death experience. I've been reflecting on the dream since yesterday. The contents of the dream itself aren't particularly important, but I'd like to share some thoughts which the dream provoked that I think some people may find interesting. In the dream, I was poisoned. My drink, along with the drinks of 3 other individuals, had been poisoned. The other 3 drank until their cups were empty, and they died very quickly. I drank more slowly, and so I realized that the drink was poisoned before my cup was even half empty. And I think there's a valuable lesson there that I encourage you to meditate on. But that isn't the point I want to focus on for now. Although I had ingested a smaller dose of the poison, I feared that it was still a lethal amount, and that it would still kill me, even if it took longer for the poison to take effect due to the lower dosage. So I rushed to an emergency room. At first they didn't seem like they were very concerned, and basically refused to help me. But I pleaded with them that I would die unless they did something right away, and I was able to persuade them to help. At this point, I'm tempted to offer some comments about our healthcare system, but that isn't the point I want to focus on for now either. One point that I do want to make is that I was genuinely afraid. I didn't know it was a dream. I believed that this was real life, and that I had really been poisoned, and that I was really going to die. They took a blood sample, but said they weren't able to determine what the poison was, so they couldn't give me an antidote. I suspected that this was probably due to a lack of effort on their part, but what could I do? I could feel my body growing weaker and my consciousness fading. I knew I was dying. There was a feeling of helpless acceptance. I must have lost consciousness for a while. I'm not sure for how long, but when I regained consciousness, someone was covering my body with a sheet as if I was dead. When I say that I regained consciousness, I don't mean that I woke up. I just regained consciousness within the dream. The man almost seemed annoyed that I had regained consciousness. I had the feeling that he was feeling impatient, as if my slow death was some long and drawn-out process that was keeping him from more important things, and he just wanted to be done with it and move on to something else. My still being alive seemed to be an inconvenience to him somehow. In that way, my dream was very much like real life, because it seems to me that for the most part, that's how people make each other feel, as they're all slowly dying. But that isn't the point I want to focus on either. At that point in the dream, I had a bittersweet sense of hope mixed with sadness. I had hope because I felt as though I was beginning to work the poison out of my system. I might actually live after all. I had sadness because life in such a society as this hardly seemed like something to be desired. It was as if the society had also been poisoned somehow, and was also dying a slow death, which it also accepted helplessly. Sometimes you just wake up from dreams, and other times you sort of drift between dreaming, sleeping, and waking up for a while. This was one of those times. Half awake, I sort of laid there and reflected on the dream for a while. I found myself contemplating death and what happens to consciousness after death. I'm just going to share some of the questions and thoughts that drifted through my mind as I lay there half asleep. I'm not describing my personal philosophical beliefs here. I just find these kinds of thoughts entertaining to consider. It struck me as strange somehow that I lost consciousness within the dream and then woke up again, still within the dream. What happened to the self inside my dream while it was unconscious? It's a question that gets more and more complicated the more you think about it. It's an especially intriguing question if you consider that the self you believe yourself to be when you're awake isn't actually your true self either, and that your waking life is itself a kind of dream that your true self is dreaming. It also struck me as strange to consider what would have happened if I had died in the dream. Some people say you can't die in a dream. Some people even believe that if you die in a dream, you die in real life. Of course, some people say they have died in dreams, and of course, they're still alive. But it seems to me that if you can lose consciousness in a dream, as I did, then of course you can die in a dream. But what then? In this particular instance, my consciousness returned to the body it identified with in the dream. Perhaps that dream hadn't quite reached its ending point yet. Maybe I wasn't finished with that dream. Maybe I hadn't done or learned whatever I dreamed that dream in order to do or learn. And maybe I still haven't. Perhaps I'll have to enter again into a different dream in order to learn whatever lessons I may have failed to learn in that dream. Of course, more than likely, I'll be someone else completely in that dream, and the events and circumstances of the dream will be very different on the surface. But my subconscious mind will be attempting to bring the same lessons or insights into my conscious awareness through different dream symbols. This is a way of looking at it anyway. And this is a way of looking at karma and reincarnation as well, perhaps. And so if you die in a dream, you might return back to that same dream in a manner analogous to a near-death experience. Or you might enter into a different dream, with no recollection whatsoever of the former dream, in a manner analogous to reincarnation. Of course, once you complete your dream cycle and wake up, you may very well recall all of your dreams, and have memories of the different selves you identified with in that series of dreams. Or you may forget some, or all of them. Of course, you may also dream that you die and then enter heaven, hell, or some other experience of the afterlife. I've had dreams in the past where I went to heaven or hell, and I've even dreamed that I woke up from the dream. This is analogous to people who have near-death experiences and then claim to have had a glimpse of heaven or hell or nirvana. And I won't rule out the possibility that some people do go to either heaven or hell when they die. The same universal mind which dreams the universe and dreams itself into a multiplicity of embodied existences within that dream universe may very well continue its conscious identification with those dream selves after dreaming of the deaths of their bodies. But it seems unlikely to me that such dreams of heaven and hell would be more permanent than other dreams. Of course, dream time is funny. If the universe is mental and infinite, we can imagine an infinite number of infinities contained within infinity. Just as there are an infinite number of numbers on the number line, there are an infinite number of fractions or decimals between any two numbers on the number line. And yet each of those infinities has a beginning and an end. So is it possible to think of a soul as spending an eternity in heaven and hell, and yet to think of that eternity as a moment within a greater eternity? Could you have spent an infinite number of eternities in an infinite number of heavens and hells already? If so, then what is it you still haven't learned? Why are you dreaming that you're who you are now? What is it that the subconscious of the universal mind is trying to bring into its own conscious awareness through you? Of course, to the materialist, this all sounds delusional and irrational. This is because he's having a dream in which this dream is all there is. He's dreaming that who he is in this dream is who he really is. He's dreaming that his consciousness is the product of the brain, which is part of his body in the dream, and which is in reality simply a part of the dream itself. But in this dream, he believes that his consciousness can't survive the death of the dream body. And if he believes this dream strongly enough, then perhaps when he dies in the dream, he enters into a dreamless sleep, which is what Socrates compared death to. But of course, in time, he will either wake up, or else other dreams will arise. It's also possible to imagine that death is eternal, in the same sense that we imagined heaven and hell to be eternal just a moment ago. But from an experiential point of view, how is that different from saying that death is only for an instant? Think of a time when you've woken up without even realizing you'd fallen asleep. Perhaps we can think of being dead for an eternity in this way, as roughly analogous to the way that the infinite number of fractions of a second between 1 second and the next pass by in a second. It's as if they don't exist. But in a sense, it's these non-existent gaps or intervals that make the eternal series possible. In much the same way that the interplay of dimensionless points and the infinitely divisible spaces between those points on a Cartesian grid make dimensional space possible. Or in much the same way that timeless instants and the infinitely divisible intervals between them make the passage and experience of time possible. Or in much the same way that the space and silence between notes makes music possible. And I think I'll end on that note. Thanks for listening, and I hope this discussion has sparked your imagination. Until next time, sweet dreams.